All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly, and joining us on the Uma guest line to talk about an exciting day in 49er news is Todd Husak, former Stanford quarterback, currently part of the KMBR 49er family, part of the pre- and post-game show, and be back in 2026 for more hijinks on the pre- and post-game show. What's up, Todd? How are you?
Doing well. There's no day off for the NFL offseason, so a
No
lot to talk
days off.
about, a lot to cover, and I'm excited to be back for another fun season. Sit next to you. I got to make sure we keep our seats next to each other upstairs in the box.
Yeah, and we're going to see a little bit of a different football team. So let's get right into it. Big story of the day. The 49ers released first by Adam Schefter. It always matters who gets it first. It doesn't matter to me or you, but for whatever reason, Shefty got there first. So 3-year deal, $60.4 million. Mike Evans, future Hall of Famer, 6-time Pro Bowl wide receiver, coming to town. Give me your takeaway. What do you think?
Well, they needed a wide receiver one. We had talked about it really all season, is that they don't have a guy that scares a defense. And Juwan Jennings was a fine player. Pearsall has a chance to be a consistent wide receiver, but they don't have anybody in that wide receiver room that scares a defense. And I think with Mike Evans, they do. We'll see. I don't think there's any chance he's going to be with the 49ers for 3 years. I think that's a 2-year contract.
Right.
And so we'll figure out what the payment is over those 2 years. But they needed a wide receiver one. I think they got better. And as we've seen some of those wide receiver contracts play out, like what Wendell Robinson got paid by the Titans and what Alec Pierce got paid by the Colts, like I don't think they invest that type of money into those wide receivers looking for the big contract that aren't game breakers, that aren't guys who scare defense. And so I think they have to be prudent in how they build that wide receiver room, and getting kind of the big guy in there is a good move without breaking the bank. Ayuk will be gone. I think Juwan Jennings kind of has talked about he'll be elsewhere. And so right now it's Pearsall and Evans, and we'll see if Romeo comes and Romeo Doubs comes and makes that wide receiver room a little bit better. But what they need is for some of those young wide receivers to step up and become NFL players that they've drafted, and Cowings and Watkins. Those are really the pieces now that can complement those veteran wide receivers and become a good wide receiver room, because it's not a wide receiver core. You can't have four slot wide receivers, right? Or 4 X guys who just win down the field. You need complementary pieces to have a really effective passing game. And Mike Evans is a big piece of the puzzle that they were lacking, but they've got to have Pearsall step up and stay healthy. And then they've got to have some of those young wide receivers become contributors, which they haven't done anything so far in their young careers.
Yeah. I mean, somebody said, oh, well, he didn't play a lot last year. He had a clavicle issue. I don't view that as, some kind of perennial clavicle issues. It's, you either have that injury or you don't. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no residual effect of that, but it's not as concerning to me as if he had something that was a little bit more chronic. This is one of the most consistent players of this era, really. 108 career touchdowns, over 13,000 career receiving yards, 11 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, tied with Jerry Rice for the most in the history of the league. This guy's won a Super Bowl. I don't know. The way I look at it is, yeah, I would have loved a younger receiver. I'd love them to have like the next Malik Neighbors, or, find this awesome receiver, but maybe you got to do that in the draft. As far as I look at it, as you had Brandon Ayuk on under contract for $27 million for this year. And then he, gets his contract voided. All that money comes back to you. And so you got like in the neighborhood of north of $80 million back from that voiding of his contract. And now you're given a gigantic chunk of that 27 million, 20 of it to Evans. And, who's better? Would you rather have Evans off of a clavicle at this point, based on what you know about him, or would you rather have Ayuk off of that knee injury, based on what you know about him? I think this is a big win for the Niners.
Yeah, Ayuk is. I think you got to cut ties. Like I'm more worried about his focus and mental state right now, the ability to come back and do what needs to be done on the mental side to be a consistent football player. Like he has the physical ability, but some of the things he's done, it's not headed in the right direction for him, I think, personally. So I like Mike Evans. I wish we had the 27-year-old Mike Evans and not the 33-year-old Mike Evans, but he can still be an effective receiver. And Brock really hasn't had a guy that he can just chuck it up to. Hey, we're going to run a go route and you win. And we're going to see that, I think, for the first time in Brock's career, where he can just take a chance down the field. When they did throw it down the field, and I think he was one of the best, maybe the top 2 or 3 best second-level passers in the NFL. His ability to put it over the linebackers and in front of the safeties on that 18 to 25-yard in route is as good as anybody in the NFL. We haven't seen him throw deep very much because they haven't had a guy that can run it deep, like not run by anybody. And so I think this is the first time where we can see Mike Evans, if he's going to get single covered, let's take a shot or two a game. And that was a huge piece that the 49ers were lacking last year. It'll open up the rest of it'll open up the run game. It'll open up the slot wide receivers. Larry, we've talked about this. I'd love to see a running back component get added, whether maybe it's Jordan James comes up and becomes a player. They pick up a free agent, but somebody that can carry it 15 times a game so they can take a load off McCaffrey and then use McCaffrey more in the slot. I still think 49ers need to get McCaffrey the ball 20 times a game, and maybe that's 10 to 12 carries and 8 catches. But use him more as a slot wide receiver, limit his touches between the tackles where he's getting pounded, and keep him healthy and full go for 18 games or 18 weeks during the regular season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm a believer that Lynch has already kind of told us that he thinks Debo is coming back. We didn't see Debo go anywhere else today. If my read on that's right, and Debo's back, and you have Debo, and now you have Evans, and you have Pearsall and Cowing and Watkins and Demarcus Robinson, are you set at wide receiver? Would you like to add one more? And since we're just talked about it's important that it's a complementary room, what's the complementary piece in your mind if that is their configuration? If Debo is coming back, what's the final receiver look like in your mind?
They're already the oldest team in the NFL. Like, again, I think adding a 33-year-old wide receiver and Debo's, it's all relative. He's not old, but he's got some tread on. He doesn't have a lot of tread left on the tires. That guy's run some miles in the NFL. I think bringing him back would almost be more of a attitude, culture piece. Him and Trent Williams are good buddies. Maybe that keeps Trent here and happy. Maybe it adds some leadership to that wide receiver room. I do think they need it. They need a piece like a Cowing or a Watkins piece where it's some speed underneath. He can catch a crossing route and go for 25. I think Rashid Shaheed, who got re-signed by Seattle, I think he didn't have the stats, but what he did to their offense, he can take the top off. They would throw it to him deep once or twice a game. All of a sudden, that safety needs to be prepared, and that opens up the underneath passing game. The Niners that do not have that 4-3 guy who can run by the opponent. Mike Evans will win down the field, but he's not running by anybody. I think having that piece that is just a burner that a secondary has to be prepared for, maybe that's in the room already. We just haven't seen it. I do think they need to draft somebody. Again, the 49ers are not just building for 2026. They got to look 2 or 3 years out because you got to think Trent has 1 at the most 2 years left. How much longer does Kittle have? How much longer does Bosa have? You mentioned these guys in your tweet last week. Is this a time for the 49ers to get markedly younger and more athletic and faster? I don't think you can let Warner go. I think he's too much of a leader on that defensive side. I don't think you can let your best pass rusher go when you're already the worst pass rushing team in the NFL. But those guys have got to stay healthy. And Larry, we talked about it in the preseason last year. 49ers needed some of those draft picks to become good NFL starters, and they needed those veterans, their top-tier players, to play at their Hall of Fame type levels and stay healthy. And that didn't happen. In fact, most of those veteran guys got nicked up and missed a good portion of the season. So the problem is the Rams have gotten a lot better in the last 24 hours, and the Seahawks still probably have the best roster in the NFL. So how do you win your division and get some home games in the playoffs without making some big-time moves? And that's what the front office has to figure out this offseason through the draft and adding some pieces in free agency. I still think Mac Jones has to go. There's some backup quarterbacks right now on the market that I think would be smart to reach out to the 49ers about. How do I become your backup and fast track myself back into being a top tier starter? But I think they need to add more pieces. I think what we've seen through the 49ers is I don't think you can trade players for first rounders. I think you need to trade, or you can trade them
trade first rounders.
I'm not a
players,
huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of getting draft picks for starters. Like, I think if you trade Mac Jones, you need a guy that's going to come in and be a starter. I think trading him for a first rounder, the way it's worked out for the 49ers, it's less than a coin flip on whether or not that guy's going to be a starter in 2 or 3 years. And that's not just the 49ers. That goes for many teams in the NFL.
There's a failure rate in the draft.
Correct. That's more eloquently put. So I think you need to trade him for some proven guys who can come in and be day one starters and contributors, because they have some holes to fill based on what happened last season with injuries, and they need to get younger.
Who are the quarterbacks that you could see coming here as the QB2?
I've talked about Kyler for the last 6 weeks as being.
They're saying he's going to get the starter job in Minnesota, maybe.
Yeah, and that's the risk of a guy who's that talented.
Atlanta's off the table now because they got Tua.
Right.
Miami's off the table today because they got Malik Willis.
So I think a player like that, Kirk Cousins, not sure I'd be super pumped on it. How about a guy like Justin Fields, who has failed miserably? But is he that different than Mac Jones was before last season? First round pick, has some talent, has not been able to put it together. I think lacks coaching and direction in his young career. He has the physical ability. But somebody like that who's proven and has some upside that they can develop and sees their vision of their career to be 2 or 3 years out versus it's hard because the way players are taught, I need to get all the money I can now. But I think that the 49ers have to have a vision for who's going to be their backup before they trade Mac Jones, because they still have him. But I also think the 49ers have to find somebody because they need the piece that they can get in return for Mac Jones, because there's too many gaps right now in the roster for them to compete with the Rams and the Seahawks right now. They're better. Like, even if Fred Warner and Bosa come back and Kittle comes back, which we'll see what their timetable is, Seahawks and Rams are really good teams who are going to be tough to beat next season. So how do the 49ers put together a roster that is on par with them? I like their chances on game day, but they've got to have some pieces in place in order to compete with, I think, 2 really good rosters in their division.
Niners got the receiver that they needed in Mike Evans, and then they also signed a backup offensive lineman, Vidarian Lowe, from the Patriots, who played at Illinois and was drafted by the Vikings on day 3 a couple of years ago, and has played the last 3 years in New England. He played 17 games. He was Will Campbell's backup this year. He had 4 starts. It's probably not the answer behind Trent Williams, but there's a lot of speculation that the 49ers are going to trade Trent Williams. So why don't we talk about that for a second? I mean, $38 million price tag on Trent Williams. It's too high for their cap. So their choices are to release him, renegotiate him, or trade him. And there's a cap hit if you trade him, and there's obviously a cap hit if you cut him. And he's a really, really great player. He holds all the leverage. Kansas City, they say, is waiting for the Niners to release him, and then they're going to pounce. There's talk about Houston. There's some speculation about a second-round pick. I think it's going to be more along the lines of what Rashawn Gary and Green Bay and Dallas did, where, Green Bay traded Rashawn Gary to Dallas and got like a day 3 pick. My guess is it might be higher because it's Trent and it's a tackle. Tackle's a premium position, but it's not going to be second-round pick. I would say it's do the 49ers take a 4th-round pick from Trent Williams and get down the road, or do they have a bunch of dead cap when he's done, because you're going to have to pay him going rate, and that's going to be hard to do without incurring a lot of dead cap after he's retired.
Well, that's where I'm hoping maybe Debo coming back gets a hometown discount for Trent Williams. I do think there's something to be said for John Lynch talking about his legacy and his career. And if he stays here and finishes his career with the 49ers, he gets his number up, amongst some of the greatest players to ever play in the NFL. If he leaves, is he viewed the same way? Probably not. And so how does he want to finish his career? Is the extra couple $1 million worth it to move? Maybe he thinks he can go to a team that has a chance to win it. Or does he stay and play an extra year or two, maybe at a little bit of a discount, but finish his career the right way with his buddies that he's gotten to play with over the last 4 or 5 years? I think the 49ers figure out a way to get it done. And Trent Williams figures out a way to get it done. I think it's important to him. It should be. Money's important. There's no question about it. But legacy and comfort level and trust in your coaches and the front office to put yourself in a position where you can compete for a championship, he's a big part of that. I think letting him go is a signal that the 49ers are certainly not looking at this year differently, but when you have a Hall of Fame left tackle and let him go at the expense of a couple $1 million, I think that's a tough one. It's a tough look for the rest of the guys in the locker room. So I think there's upside for both parties to figure it out. And hopefully they do that, because he is a big piece. If the 49ers want to go deep in the playoffs again, I'd love to see Trent Williams back at the left tackle spot.
Just getting tougher and tougher to do, especially because the price tag keeps going up, and he's a great player, and it cost a lot. It cost a lot.
Yep.
Somebody once said, it costs a lot to have nice things. You got to decide.
Well, that's where the last couple of years, the 49ers' lack of drafting a left tackle
burned them.
Unfortunately, they're in that position now where they don't have a viable option to replace them. Now,
and it's not that they've drafted a bunch of tackles that weren't good. It's that they haven't spent the draft pick on the tackle because they keep doubling down on the D line, because they keep taking the wrong D lineman, and then that need never goes away, and it becomes the priority. And if you're always going to prioritize A over B, and the need of A can never be fully realized, do you ever get to need B? That's kind of the story of the Niner offensive line. And it's not really a this regime deal. I mean, this is Harris Barton was the only first round pick offensive lineman outside of Bubba Paris, I believe. And for years on the 49er offensive line, all those great teams, those guys weren't first round picks. So The Niners have always gone with the Ted Washingtons and the blah, you name it, over the offensive linemen. And you do that enough, eventually you look up and you've got nothing but kind of replacement level offensive line play across the board. They've been getting, I think, pretty good play out of a good coach and a great left tackle. But man, if you take away Trent, they may have to shift their whole focus to the offensive line. What did you think of the story over the weekend about Jaylen Carter and the Niners showing interest in the Eagles defensive tackle? I thought that was extraordinarily interesting, considering that the Niners and Eagles made a trade last year for Bryce Huff. And now here's Jaylen Carter, and there was talk about Jaylen Carter for Max Crosby. And then, of course, Max Crosby goes to the Ravens. I just kind of put two and two together and thought maybe there's Jaylen Carter for Nick Bosa. But then a bunch of people were like, "Oh my God, no way! It's got to be, it's got to be for picks and Renardo Green." I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Jaylen Carter is a dominant force. He runs a little hot. This is what Dante Whitner was talking about when he was saying, "Hey, we need to go for guys who are, not necessarily choir boys." This guy's basically the Charles Haley of his era.
He's not a choir boy, and he would make them better immediately. And I think that's what the 49ers, when you're looking at not just improving, but keeping pace with two really good teams in your division, they need impact players. I think Mike Evans, if he's healthy, has the ability to be an impact player. Carter would be that guy on the defensive side. And again, it's not just, you can't look at it as one player. They make everybody else better around them. They make the front seven better. Mike Evans makes Pearsall better and Kittle better and the run game better. And that's where the 49ers have to be. And because of their cap situation and some of the contracts they've signed the last couple of years, they have to be a little more prudent. And so they don't have as much cap room as the Raiders, who I think have added like 8 free agents in the last 24 hours, or at least come to terms with them. 49ers have to be strategic and they have to find value. But when a difference maker like that is available and you can pick them up and makes your team better and also keeps them out of the competition's hands, it's a great move. So I'd be for it. I think it has to make sense from the whole list. And that's where you have to trust that John Lynch in the front office has this really larger view, 30,000 foot view of the roster and how they're going to build it, not just for this year, but for the next few years. They're fortunate enough to have a franchise quarterback locked up for the next few years. They have one of the best running backs. They have one of the best linebackers, and those guys have to stay healthy. But there's a lot of pieces they need to fill in. And adding a guy like Carter, who's certainly a Pro Bowler, all-pro type player, makes you better.
He's awesome, man. I mean, you can't have a room full of guys like this. But if you got a good room, you could have one guy or two guys like this. And I'm saying, when I say like this, I'm talking about guys that just kind of go to the beat of their own drummer. And man, you almost kind of exist around them a little bit. But special football players are special football players. And the truth is that exceptions have been made for people who produce at absurd levels for as long as time has gone on. You know what I mean? I saw Barry Bonds in the Barca Lounger. You know what I mean? I witnessed Howard Stern in his own private elevator. I mean, I've seen it up close and personal. And this guy's awesome. And you know what? I agree with Whitner. I'm not saying that the Niners D-line's soft. I mean, there's some badass dudes in there, but there's no Charles Haley, and there's no Ronnie, and there's no like that guy who, man, you are afraid to not go full bore because there's no Chris Jones ready to kill you. I mean, the Niners need their version of Ronnie or Chris Jones or Haley. They need somebody who plays insanely hard and just is such a badass that his mere presence guarantees that everybody else is bringing their A game. And I'm not sure who that is in the draft, but if you found personality types like that in the draft, I think you draft them.
Well, I think it has to be backed up by play.
Right.
And I think they have the leadership in Fred Warner. I think Bosa's that type of guy. but they were without those players for the last, half of the season. So, but you're right. Carter is a different persona than those players. But when you come out and play like the baddest dude on the field, you can do that. You can kind of control that locker room and control that front, and bring a different mentality to an entire defensive unit because you are a difference maker on the field. It's not all about talk and fire and sometimes making bad decisions on the field, but you got to back it up with being the best player on the field. And that's
no doubt.
One of the things we've talked about is the Niners need more guys that coordinators, as you put on the film in game week, how are we going to prepare for that guy? Or how are we going to attack this while approaching the defensive end and the linebacker? The Niners need more guys like that, difference makers, certainly on the offensive side and the wide receiver room. And so Evans is a piece, but I think Carter would be that guy. The offensive coordinators would have to be ready for him and Bosa. How do we prepare for that front four?
Evans and Purdy, how long is that going to take? You're a former quarterback. Mike Evans has been doing this a long time. He's one of the best. He's going to Canton. Brock Purdy's really accurate. He knows what he wants out of his receivers. He's been known to get in the face of a receiver. Evans has been known to yell at his quarterback. This could be juicy. But what do you think? How long will it take before those guys are absolutely, on the same page? Yeah.
I think it'll take half a practice. I think Brock Purdy, one of the things he does better than anybody, he throws a catchable ball.
Right.
I mean, that thing is inside the body, nice tight spiral, not too much juice on it. Like some quarterbacks, it sounds easy or intuitive. Not all quarterbacks throw a really catchable ball. So I think Mike Evans is going to appreciate that. Everything we've seen from Brock Purdy is his leadership by example and the way he prepares and the way he does things. I think that'll be recognized by Mike Evans, who's played with Tom Brady. And I think that's a pretty good comp for Brock Purdy, minus the Super Bowl wins. I think the way Brock Purdy approaches the game, approaches his preparation, is super competitive, wants to win, wants to be the best. There's no question Brock Purdy makes his receivers better by the ball he throws, his timing. And so, I mean, he just got Kendrick Bourne paid based on a couple games with him. And Juwan Jennings has benefited. I think receivers who were in the right place at the right time have benefited from playing with Brock Purdy. I think Brock's going to love having that weapon on the outside where it's a 50-50 ball. I'm going to give him a chance because he really hasn't had that. Juwan Jennings was a solid receiver. They've had some pieces on the outside. I think the way he connected with Ricky Pearsall last year in the preseason, I think had us really excited. And Pearsall just couldn't stay healthy. But Brock hasn't had a guy that he can just count on to be there and win. And so I think it's going to be a nice relationship because both guys can appreciate each other and how much they need each other right now. It's interesting. Mike Evans kind of on the downside of his career at 33 years old, and Brock on the upstart of his career where he needs playing with a Hall of Fame wide receiver. That's got to get him excited. So I think it'll be a great fit.
Greatest receiver you ever played with?
Oh, I played with some good. So my rookie year, I played with Andre Reed, who was a Hall of Famer, Irving Fryer, Michael Westbrook. In Denver, I played with Rod Smith, who was really good, Ed McCaffrey. And the Jets, we had Lavernius Coles, Santana Moss. Man, that's a good question.
I mean, Andre Reed on paper.
Hold on. Here it is. It's an easy question.
Troy Walters.
Troy Walters. That's my guy. Biletnikoff winner at Stanford. He made me look great on a few opportunities. I threw a lot of slip screens to him where he took it to the house. So I think Troy at 5'8" and won the Biletnikoff Award. He was the Pac-12's all-time leader in catches and yards by the time he was done. He was a special player. I was fortunate enough to play with him.
He was a special player for sure. Todd, awesome stuff, man. We'll do it again in a couple weeks maybe and chop it up when the Niners have a little bit more defined deal when we get a little closer to the draft. But always good to talk ball with you. Looking forward to another great year of analyzing Niner ball. Thanks for jumping on.
Can't wait. I'm sure there's been like 10 new news items that have come online since we talked. So I can't wait to catch up on that.
Seriously, everybody go to their phone. All right, thanks again. Todd Husak, more straight ahead. It's Niners Nightly on the Sports Leader.